So excited to be here with you, Rebecca. Thank you so much for taking time to do this interview with me. I know you're like super busy, and but here you are. So thank you.
No, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
All right. So first, just so you guys know, like I can't see the comments where I'm looking right now. So I'm going to look down sometimes. I'm going to see what you guys are saying. If there's questions you want to ask. So you'll notice me every once in a while looking down or looking at my notes and stuff. So I apologize for that. But let's go ahead and get started. Yeah.
I thought I said Hadassah. I should probably put my glasses on because I'm going to make a lot of mistakes if I don't.
Yeah, so she'll probably be looking too. So I see a bunch of you jumping on. Hey, Hannah. Hey, Brooke. Hey, Joelle. Hey, Brian. Hey, Pastor Rob. Hey, Debbie. I'm so glad you guys are here. Go ahead and click share on this video. You can also host a watch party. And, you know, if you're watching the replay of this, I ask that you share as well, because the information that's going to be given in this video is going to be really, I think, necessary information for girls and women to have, moms to have, dads to have. So go ahead and share this. So first off, I just want to just say how we met. And we've actually never physically met, but we kind of went through an ordeal together, journey together in the search for Hadassah. So when Hadassah went missing, I called an old friend, someone I've known for a long time, Kat French. If you're watching this, Kat, I love you. And she immediately put me in touch with Rebecca, who is a private investigator and the founder and director of Anti-Trafficking Alliance. And she said, if anyone's going to find this girl, Rebecca's going to be the one to do it. So we kind of journeyed together for 28 days looking for Hadassah. We would talk till like 1 or 2 in the morning sometimes, you know, as she was out on the streets looking for her. And yeah, so I just want to love and honor her on this video and just say thank you, Rebecca, for all that you do. Girl, Rebecca's going to be the one to do it. And let me go ahead. So if you just want to share a little bit about your experience with that journey with me, will I turn the sound off on my computer?
Sure. So yes, it was a grueling 28 days. I was definitely very young at what we do at ATA. ATA was still in the womb, so to speak. And well, I don't like to share too many details about any one case, just out of respect for the victims and for the families. I will say it was very difficult to watch the guy, the bad guy, the pimp, the trafficker, whatever, you know, name you want to use for him, post videos, and we would see her in the car or with him, and it was just like missed him by an hour. Yeah, and it was very frustrating. It was extremely frustrating. And to watch how he treated the victims, where, you know, it's painful. It's painful. It's just like, it's like, imagine your child. I mean, even if you don't have children, imagine your, you know, your dog or your cat. I mean, I'm not trying to relate it to that, but I'm just saying, if, you know, the empathy that you can understand from what it's like to watch families go through that, you know, whether you have children or not, it's just, it's tough to watch and to be a part of.
It was. I was shocked with how much of a monster this guy was, and that he had the audacity and the boldness to post videos of him abusing girls on Facebook. It really blew my mind. So yeah, that's how Rebecca and I met. And then we were actually reconnected when I did the live with Hadassah. And yeah, so let's jump right in. We have a bunch of stuff that we're going to cover. So I have my notes here. So why don't you share a little bit about your organization now and what you guys, what your goal is, what you see your organization doing in the future.
Sure. So Anti-Trafficking Alliance was founded in 2018. It's founded by myself and JB Rice, who is instrumental in everything that we do. He typically doesn't do too many interviews, so he couldn't be here today, but I see he's hosting a watch party. So hi, JB. And I'm sure he might chime in. And also, JB, if you want to chime in, text me, please, if there's anything you would like me to relay. But we're co-founders. We are definitely each other's right hand. And we formed last year, March of last year. We got our 501 status back. And I mean, ultimately what we do is we're both private investigators. And we use our skill set to find missing kids. We work with law enforcement very closely. It's, definitely huge and instrumental in what we do. We've worked with many different agencies. Pretty much Texas is our backyard, but Houston is really kind of where we focus. But we do have some out-of-state cases, just, due to the nature of them being, the girls being moved from city to city. So sometimes things do go from here to Austin or San Antonio or Dallas or Louisiana or Florida, even New York. So that being said, it's, we have kind of a wide net that we cast, and we use some really great softwares that are very helpful if we do have to look outside of Houston. So him and I formed this, and we work with law enforcement, and our goal is to get the girls from where they're at and get them into medical care and into hopefully a long-term care if that's what they choose to do. But I would say 99% of our clients are minors.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that leads us right into like the first question. And we talked, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? And you were just like, I was just like, this girl is like a Marine undercover. This girl is so fierce. The stuff that you do, and like, I love it. So share with us like what a mom calls you, or you're put in touch with a family and their girl is missing. And so you're actively looking for her. Can you share what a 24-hour period, let's say, would look like in the search for that girl?
Well, I mean, every case is very different. I mean, there's a lot of, overlapping nuances and variables that we see time and time again, but for the most part, every situation is different. I mean, I can give you just an example of one, which is Black Friday of 2017, which is one we use often because it was one of our first cases that JB and I started really working together on. And another parent who is of a victim of sex trafficking called me and said, "Hey, there's this lady, her daughter's missing and she needs your help. Can you help her?" And so, after spending the holiday with the family, cooking leftovers, I am stirring a pot with one hand and on my phone with the other, and actively trying to find her. Social media has definitely been our ally in some ways, to locate. For that reason, I know a lot of people don't like social media for some of the issues that have kind of helped sex trafficking, right? But it's almost a necessary evil. And so it's great when they're on social media and we can locate them and try to make contact. So I did, and I thought I was talking to her, but it turns out I was talking to him. And he called me, and I finessed my way into getting him to agree to meet with me. And it's super dangerous what I did. And we worked with law enforcement on that. We almost always work with law enforcement, but it was a holiday and they were short-staffed, as many things are understaffed on holidays. And we ended up recovering her out of a hotel on Southwest Freeway in Houston, on the southwest side. And she loved him. She thought of them as a couple. He's what we call a Romeo, which in my opinion is the worst, because they're a psychologist without a degree. I heard somebody say that once, and it really does hit the nail on the head. They get their hooks mentally, into the girls and make them think that they're going to build this life together. And so getting her to work with law enforcement and say what happened, even if it wasn't, he raped me or he this or that, or he sold me, because that was hard in that situation, because she really thought that they were like together, like an item. And so we had to get very creative and fast. Um, at that time, I think the DA was only willing to do harboring of a runaway. And so we had to get very creative. And so since the phone was owned by the mother, she had given me permission to open it and to, get the information off of it. And so we were. And so thankfully, law enforcement was able to file additional charges. He's still currently in jail. We're awaiting trial.
Mm.
Oddly, I got a call from their PI on the defense side, which I haven't gotten one of those before. That was the first. So, to get my statement or whatever. So I'm usually on the other end of it on a, work level. And so, and he's going away for a while because he has done some really crazy stuff while incarcerated. I think organized crime and like deadly assault or something. So he couldn't act right on the outside, and he certainly couldn't act right on the inside. So he's not getting out anytime soon. So I don't have to worry about that. So, that started, I get the call about 3-4 o'clock, and by midnight, we find her. And I'm using a holiday 24 hours, but typically, I'm up at 6. I try to be out the door by 8 to drop my kids off, by 8. And then, by 8:15, 8:20, I'm at an attorney's office or my office. And JB and I are constantly in contact all day. I don't even want to know how many times a day we talk. I don't want to think about that number, but we're just constantly, hey, we have a family that needs us, and him and I, we tag team, depending on what we have for the day. Sometimes I have court, or sometimes he has court, or so we tag team, and we really work together as a really good team. It's only 2 of us, but we're very effective. And he's really the liaison for law enforcement. He comes from a law enforcement background, so his family. So it's, he interfaces very well. So, and he's got a huge heart, and he's, really great with the victims and helping me not die on and off. So,
yeah,
that's really what it is.
You go to the streets. You go out on the streets, into the early morning hours. You use social media. I'm assuming that you do like searches, and you use, false accounts, and you do all kinds of.
I use, actually, on my own account, I use it. I don't.
Oh, you use it?
Yeah. I don't really post. I have some personal stuff on there, but it's private. So
yeah,
they would have to request and see it. So I really don't.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then even your profile photos, you can't see you.
Yeah. I have a profile of, on my profile. Right. So
yeah.
Not really big into selfies anyways, never was. So,
Yeah, but you're so pretty. You could do great selfies. So when Backpage was a thing, I remember I didn't even know what Backpage was. It's actually, they've taken it down, but that was a tool that you guys used a lot.
Oh yeah, we used it quite a bit.
Yeah, and they would literally list the girls under code words or something. It was almost like a Craigslist for that kind of a thing.
And Craigslist shut their personals down as well, anticipating litigation. So
yeah, just crazy. The amount of stuff that's online that people use to exploit people. It's crazy. So share one or 2 stories in the last, even before you guys started Anti-Trafficking Alliance, you were doing this type of work. So share 1 or 2 stories that just really stand out to you of girls that you have been involved in their recovery. And then also, you have busted rings and, gotten people arrested, those that are purchasing and those that, exploit and sell.
Sure.
So even that, just 1 or 2 stories that are oh my gosh, this, really shocked me, without giving identifying information.
Sure. Do you want it on a commercial level or more of a personal, missing kid level?
Whichever stands out to you.
I got to think about one. We have so many. Who's calling? I'm trying to think what would be one that you guys would want to hear about. JB, chime in and text me if you think there's one in particular that we should discuss. I mean, so we work closely with law enforcement. So if it's like, I'll just go through it. When we work with law enforcement, we're working to, track a pimp, if he's got a warrant and he's charged, with a crime against one of our clients. One of the services that we provide is that we want to locate him because we're good at locating. So, and we'll spend the necessary time and internet intelligence to search for him and find out where he is or where he hangs out, and then hand it over to law enforcement. So that's one thing. Really, all we're doing is just it's almost like a hunting dog. Is that we're just locating and pointing and going right here, and they come and get them. They've already done what they needed to do to get themselves into that situation in the first place. Eventually, they would be caught unless, I guess, they flee the country. But you know what I'm saying. So it's not. I don't like to think that I get them arrested per se. I like to think that they get themselves arrested. so there's that aspect. And yes, we've seen the rings. We've identified several that buy and sell women and girls. And there's different types of pimps. So there's like the gorilla pimp, which is the most violent. When he wants something, he just takes it. There's no regard for the law. I mean, there is none across the board, but they're the most brazen. And then you have your Romeo pimps, which in my opinion are the most dangerous because it's more of a psychological game. Sure, they may be violent. That's a thing across the board with their behavior, but they really get they play a mental a game with the women. So to get them, then you get Stockholm syndrome where they feel sorry for them. They don't want to make an outcry. That sort of thing. Then you have your party pimps or your club pimps, which those are typically, they want to operate out of nightclubs, that even just regular nightclubs, and they, those are there's a huge ring here in Houston that we have with that. And they trade girls like trading cards. I mean, well, they all do, but, they're on a higher level, higher end of things, where they don't have girls necessarily that walk the street, but that work the higher end hotels and work off of websites like Eros.
So those would be like escorts, those girls.
Correct. Where it's like you order them on the phone, or on the, that was kind of, well, Backpage was never really high end, I would say. It was more kind of,
it was
girls who walk the street also had a Backpage ad. Once Backpage was shut down with Fosta Sesta, which was the thing that passed with the Senate, it kind of scattered all of the ads onto all these different offshore websites that would offshore hosted websites, dating websites. So that became, made it a little more difficult. It actually made it a lot more difficult because I had more of a one-stop shop versus now, there's just like you shut down one and 100 opened up, which I think is great that they did that. Don't get me wrong, but just made things a little more difficult. So,
I wondered when they shut it down, like I remember on Facebook, those that, are kind of have a heart for the trafficking, crisis in the world. And they, was like, oh yay, Backpage is down. But I actually was like, I wonder, just remembering, what we went through with her, if that's actually going to hinder those that do the recoveries, those that are looking for them.
I mean, for a minute it did, but it's just, we had to get creative, and that's our job, is to become creative and to problem solve. It's like, okay, we hit a roadblock, how do we solve this? I mean, it's just problem solving 101. And thankfully I have JB, and we have an incredible tech person on our team named Stefano. We just go back to the drawing board, and we did. And so it's fine. It's just at first it was a little like, all right, now we have to rethink what we're doing. But so, we get, parents call us, and it's either JB and I that goes and tries to meet with the family. If we can't physically do it, we call them, speak to them. On our website, atahtx.org, we have 3 different forms, but 2 specifically. One is for a missing adult and one is for a missing child. You don't necessarily have to know that there's sex trafficking going on to ask for our services. And sometimes we just get a kid who's couch surfing. And that's okay. We're glad to get them home and get them, in a safe environment, if that's, what it takes. So.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, a lot of parents. I'm a part of different groups on Facebook for missing people, missing children. And it seems like now, because there's like, the heightened media attention on the issue of human trafficking, when a girl specifically goes missing, that I would say is in the top 3 things that the family feels is likely happening. Oh, they've been trafficked. Yeah. So I would imagine that when young girls go missing in Houston, that you guys are the ones that they contact. Yeah, let's go in like, huh?
I said we need to do a little more advertising. I mean, law enforcement, for the most part, the ones that we work with, know about us and have come to us as well. That's another way that we get cases, is they'll say, hey, we really can't work. They have so many coming in the door, and there's only so many of them, that are dedicated to this. And so, we gladly offer our services, or if they need, short-term housing until the client can get into a long-term program, or even short-term. But, sometimes there's a window of 24 hours to 2 weeks. And so that's something that we also have recently implemented, where we will get an Airbnb, we will provide security. We have a couple of churches that we partner with where they have a women's team that we really trust and have worked with and have just had such a great experience with doing this. And they'll go stay with them, pray with them, take care of them, cook for them, provide for them in that time of that 24 hours to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you guys are doing an amazing work again. So let's move into the next one. And this one, when you were talking about this with me the other day, it was really like eye-opening. But you have a little bit of understanding of how the minds of pimps work, what they're doing, the manipulation, and almost, I work a lot with victims of domestic violence, and there's so much crossover in the behaviors. And I was just like, wow, like, it seems to be, I don't know, but it seems to be a lot of power and control,
Absolutely.
stuff going on. But why don't you share some of the stuff you shared with me about the mind of a pimp, and even how you communicate with pimps if you get into a situation where you're trying to find someone. And so you like, I don't know, like what you can share on live Facebook, absolutely. But whatever you can share.
So, I mean, I've met quite a few pimps and actually talked to them. I actually welcome it, which I know JB, it's like he reels when I do that, because he has no mercy for them. And I don't necessarily think that I have any mercy at all. But when I'm very curious about something, or even afraid, I like to just say, what am I afraid of? Yes, they're dangerous people, but there's a lot of dangerous people that we encounter in the daytime or walk past that are dangerous, and you just don't know. Yeah. So I can't live in that sort of place of fear. Now, I don't try to walk in a place of stupidity either, but I have interviewed a few of them. And when I say interview, I use that term loosely, actually. It's more like they've approached me when I was much younger and said, trying to figure out, what are my insecurities? What are my issues that they can kind of solve, or, a way to get their hooks in you. So when you're talking to them, they're really just trying to figure you out. They're asking you questions, and they're trying to almost typecast you and figure out how they can take control, like you said, of you to make a profit. And a lot of these guys, they can't have a regular job. They have records. They're typically not your, squeaky clean guy. I mean, they do exist. I mean, there was that pilot from United, who was, I can't remember if he was acquitted or what, here in Houston, you can Google it, who was charged with prostitution and trafficking. So, so you do have those that do, I'm sure exist. It's just when the ones I deal with typically are, have violent crime history, or, robbery, ag rob, or possession of a weapon, drugs, these sort of things. So, but what I find with most of them is that they have, I think they have mommy issues. I think they just have such an disdain for women. I can't speak to what it is that happened in their life, but I mean, for you to, and this in domestic violence, for you to hit a woman or hit an innocent person who's small and fragile, and just to be able to brutalize them, I mean, and you're the opposite sex, like you have to have an issue with women. I mean, that's just kind of a no-brainer. I'm just trying to think of, you know, kind of what, I know we spoke about it the other day, but
yeah, there's a lot of studies that have been done on, and I would be curious to compare if there's been studies done on traffickers, but on men that abuse their you know, their spouse or their girlfriend. And they discovered over, you know, 30 years of research, this group of men who were working with batterers, that it really wasn't an anger issue. It wasn't anger. It was power and control birthed in ideology, how they viewed women. And they were shocked with how calculated the violence was. So, you know, the old theory was that, you know, the woman in her hysteria would trigger anger in the man because he had an anger problem. And so he needed anger management, therapy and treatment. But what they now know is that it's all very calculated. And
right, they beat them, and then the next minute they're preparing a bubble bath, you know, or taking them somewhere that they like to go, or, you know, pampering them in some way. Yeah, there's very methodical. I mean, there's books written on it. It's very methodical. But I mean, in some ways, though, when you mentioned she's hysterical and he wants to abuse her, that goes right back to control.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, in my opinion, I would see that he just sees an issue within himself. He hates himself because he's like, well, I don't have control over her, so let me beat her. And really, he's angry at him. You know, there's like this, he's angry at her, but he's more angry at himself because he has to get control of the situation. It's almost like, I don't have control of her right now, so I need to, you know, slap her around or punch her or whatever. You know, I mean, it's definitely about them. It's not. It's all about them. In my opinion, they're very narcissistic.
Yes, insecure, narcissistic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's definitely, there's a lot of crossover. I am now interested in researching that more, how much of a crossover there is. Obviously, traffickers are a whole different bunch because they're not just with one individual trying to control them. They're literally exploiting you know, multiple individuals. That's a whole other level, you know, that you deal with. So yeah, it just was so interesting when you were talking about your conversations with pimps and like how you knew that they were really trying. You were there because you're trying to figure them out, but they're trying to figure you out.
Yeah. I mean, they're really the most dangerous ones, in my opinion, on the physical harm, are the gorillas, because they're not going to think twice about, you know, becoming violent really quick.
Yeah.
I actually ran into one not that long ago at a gas station. Now, he didn't know who I was, but I knew who he was. And I happened to have my kids with me. It was after school, and I just picked them up, and we wanted a snack. So we, you know, wanted something to drink, and pop into the gas station. And sure enough, there he is. And he's a gorilla, and he's very well known in Houston. So I'm talking to my kids. I'm super nervous. I'm trying to hide it. I'm trying to just kind of stay on the other side of the store. And, you know, inevitably the line was taking too long, as they always do inside of a gas station. And so I have to walk up to the line, and I'm about, you know, 6 feet, 8 feet behind him. My kids kind of here. And I'm talking to them and just trying to keep them busy and just, you know, focused on me. And so he turns around to me and he's like, what language are you speaking? But when he said it, I couldn't understand him. And I said, excuse me? And he goes, what language are you speaking? And I just kind of looked at him like, okay. And he paid and he went on his way. But it was very like nerve-wracking because he's the kind of person that doesn't care. So if you piss him off, it's, you know.
Yeah, and you're with your children. I mean, that's a very vulnerable situation. Okay, let's move to we can talk, or you can talk about drug addiction after this one, but understanding victims' response to captivity, or why will a girl not leave? So there's like, you probably know, like there's probably multiple forms of trafficking, but the two that I can think of are like the victim that is literally, you know, put in a room in her apartment and cannot escape. And then there's those that maybe think they're in some sort of control, but the pimp has control of them and they could escape, but they don't, but they're still victims. Like, can you touch on, you know, the person that would say, well, why don't they just leave? Same question that victims of DV get. Well, why don't you just leave? And there's so much that goes to that. And I'm not going to touch on that. But for trafficking, can you touch on that?
Sure. I mean, one of the most common things that we see is why don't, you know, when people say, why don't you just leave? Well, sometimes their situation is not necessarily more ideal. You know, if you meet a woman in a strip club, for example, which is a commercial, you know, the commercialized side of things, and you're like, well, why does she want to be here? I mean, the truth of it is, at some point, something has happened in her life that made that a viable option. Okay. Rather it's, you know, desperate to keep the lights on and the rent paid and take care of your kids, and there's no other option to, you know, or be homeless, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, well, in my opinion, in kind of tandem with that is there's some sort of trauma or abuse that says, you know what, at least I don't have to be abused by, you know, my uncle or my dad, or, you know, by their friend, or, you know, that sort of thing. It's like, you know, this is better because at least I can pay my bills and have my own apartment and have safety in that regard, than have to be in that home and be abused, you know, there. So, and then it's like, and taking my clothes off is not as hard as XYZ. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of primer and grooming that happens prior to when you see, you know, and I don't think this is not a 100, you know, one size fits all or 100%, you know, kind of ideal. I think it's different for a lot of people. I mean, I have friends that, you know, were never molested or abused, but, you know, were very just extroverted and they weren't afraid, and, you know, had like no fear of doing that sort of thing. But I would say for the most part, it comes out of a necessary survival place. And I don't think that it's something that you wake up and go, I am so excited to go do this today. No, that's where you got the self-medicating. And then a lot of times they'll go into it with no drug problems, and then they come out with one because they self-medicate, whether it's alcoholism or, you know, actual drugs, or, well, they're all drugs, but, you know, it's kind of almost a necessary evil to get through the shift, or to get through, you know, walking the streets or whatever. So if you don't have a pimp, and I guess let me bring it back, if you don't have a trafficker or pimp in this scenario, and they're doing it out of survival, or they're doing it out of, you know, necessity to whatever degree, or it's just that that's all they know. They don't feel that they can get a better job or go back to school. There's the self-worth and the identity is completely missing. So there's that. And then, you know, the ones that do have pimps and don't really want to be there, but they agree to be there, and they, you know, they feel like they have some sort of control. I mean, to that, I would say it's just a delusion. Yeah. Right. And then even if they feel like, okay, I can run right now, again, it goes back to who's going to help me, who's going to be on my side. Or you have the control of violence and fear of violence towards yourself or towards your family or towards, you know, maybe another loved one. So then there's that. So, I mean, I'm sure there's more, but these are just the things from personal experience and an opinion that I've dealt with. I'm no psychologist, so, you know, I'm sure there's definitely more out there, reasons why they stay. But I think sometimes that's all they know, and they just can't see themselves, you know, and what it could look like if they, you know, leave that lifestyle. Yeah, it just, I mean, obviously the overall solution to that would be better services for single moms, or like women that are, you know, just struggling financially and can't pay the bills, and they are already vulnerable because they're impoverished. And so if there were better services to take care of that, I mean, I did a video, I don't know, last year or something, because I went online and I did a search on women in business, and the stuff that came up was not about women entrepreneurs. It was about women in the strip club industry, or like trying to almost like
I don't know, and then women on welfare, women in all of these different things. It was just like women and single moms on the internet are labeled as like this needy population, and they can't do anything else other than, you know, be on social or be on government services and work in a strip club. And in fact, there are literally like dozens of strip clubs who have been, you know, the media's blasted them because they literally put signs out, single moms, you know, can apply here, or like single moms, you can make money here. Like literally like advertising and targeting.
Right. And then you have our society and culture berating them or degrading them for getting public assistance.
Yeah. So it's just
kind of like, I mean, for me, when I was in the lifestyle, I was 16. I had already been primed. I was basically homeless. You know, and I thought, well, it's a nightclub, you know, I mean, how bad could it be?
Yeah.
Well, gee, let's talk about how bad it could be. It could be very bad. Yeah. I mean, there's so much labor law and civil rights violations in them, not let alone, or really, it's like labor law violations, civil rights violations, and basically they're like the monster trafficker. And I'm sorry, but you're charging a fee for them to work there when you have crazy liquor sales, which is, it is what it is, but it's, you know, I mean, for them, I guess it's a great business model, but you know, you're forcing them to work shifts when they're an independent contractor. I mean, I don't know what it's like now. It's been so many years, but, you know, and you have them, well, I can speak for Houston. You have the, there's a group of strip clubs that are all owned by the same brothers, and they have a deal with the city, and they tax on their drinks, and I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it's in the several millions that they donate to the city. And you know where that money, well, at least as of a couple of years ago, that money went towards HPD's Vice unit. I mean, so I don't really have to say it, right?
What
are
we doing as a society? Like,
but then we're going to degrade you for going to work there because you want to pay your bills and you don't want to be on government assistance. I mean, we have to take care of our single moms. I'm so sorry, but that's, you know, as a woman who's married with 2 children, I've been married going on 11 years. It's kind of crazy because it's like, it's already stressful enough with 2 parents trying to get through paying bills, life, raising 2 kids and trying to do it correctly, you know, running 3 different businesses, you know, that sort of thing. That as a single mom, if God forbid I was ever a single mother, I don't know, I would probably freak out a bit because it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't, you know, I have a few that single moms through ATA, they were clients of some fashion, you know, rather we rescue them or rather we're just providing services to them, you know, referral services or what have you. I have 3 under my wing that I take care of. And I kind of only keep it at 3 because that's really like my max because I'm so overwhelmed with life and my plate is full. But, you know, if they call me and they're like, I need, you know, part of my rent paid, or I need, you know, grocery store gift cards, like I help them out. I don't make them feel bad about it.
Yeah.
You know, and we have a great relationship, so it's good, but I wouldn't recommend everybody do that. I think boundaries have to be there and you've got to really know what you're doing, but, I wouldn't have it any other way. Of course, I want them to call me. I want to help them. I don't want them to ever feel like they can't ask me for something and then they're put out, you know?
Yeah. You're amazing again and again. All right, let's move on. We've got probably another 15 minutes and then we need to wrap this up just so it doesn't go over an hour. How, and we did touch on the drug addiction outcomes. You know, you mentioned briefly when we talked depression, anxiety, drug addiction, those are all risks and outcomes associated with trafficking. But let's move into how can someone protect themselves, be aware, because a lot of people that will be watching this, I have a lot of young people that are on my Facebook, and many of them are at risk because of the communities that they live in and their economic status. and you know, the various things that they're involved with, they are at risk. So how can someone protect themselves, be aware, and then touch on how parents can communicate how their daughters can be aware?
Well, I mean, we've had clients of all areas, whether, you know, different races, different economic status, religion. I mean, you name it, it's pretty much even immigration status. You know, we help everybody because, you know, that's really what we're about. And we've had a couple of boys that we've helped since we've incepted. Well, I mean, bottom line is this: social media, they're out there trolling these guys, and they're constantly looking for girls to, I mean, you have your taken, right? Like your get snatched off the street. And we do see those. They're way more rare versus you meet a guy online, he starts liking your photos, and then, you know, you start chatting with him. You know, you're having a bad day and you're looking for some validation. Maybe things are bad at home. I mean, I'm speaking to minors here for kids. You're having a bad day, you got in a fight with mom or dad, or maybe you just have one parent at home, and they're going through the stress of raising kids by themselves, or maybe mom and dad are not getting along. And so you get on social media and start chatting, and, you know, you meet a guy who's really nice and he starts talking to you and he's really complimentary and he says, oh, I would love to take you out. And then you start going out with him. And sometimes you'll go out with him a few times and he's totally like cool and normal. You're like, okay, cool. Not scary, not, you know, I mean, there's definitely a type. I feel like you can, on a style level, you can kind of see him from a mile away. And now I wouldn't say that's 100% of traffickers and pimps. For sure, you have, like, you know, some that aren't as eccentric looking or, you know, decked out in jewelry and designer clothing. But I would say majority of them are. So,
Okay.
you know, they like to entice. You know, that's really what they're trying to do, is entice. Find out what it is, you know, about you that you are insecure about, or you have issues with, if there's issues at home, you know, then they'll begin to say, oh, send me a picture of you. And then the pictures will probably become more progressively obscene, you know, nudity. And then what they'll do is they'll say, you know, if you don't come with me tonight, I'm going to show these pictures to everybody. In a similar scenario with a girl we rescued, she was out of a Klein ISD, high schooler. She had already been molested by some family members in her younger years. But when she got into her teenage years, there was actually a friend, a neighbor, who she would go over to her house and hang out, and they, you know, started spending the night at each other's houses. And then not too long after that, she spends the night at the friend's house, and they decide to go joyriding with some older boys. And she ends up at a party. She ends up getting date raped, drugged, and they gang raped her. And not only did they do that, but they filmed it. And they said, if you don't come with us, we're going to spread this all over the school. We're going to show your parents. And she was afraid of what would happen if that happened. So things weren't already good at home. I mean, sure, she had a great roof over her head. You know, her mother and her stepfather made really good money. But it wasn't a great place for her, you know, as far as she had her own personal issues. She was lonely. You know, she was now at that point dabbling in drugs. And so here's some freedom, you know, so, and to some degree, it's like she wanted that, you know, she felt like, I'm already taking care of myself, so to speak. Why don't I just go out on my own, you know? And then now these guys are threatening me. So there was a combination of things that made, you know, that led to her decision on that. So, you know, I mean, just another example. And then when I recovered her, which I sat for 3 hours outside of the hotel room, and I just, you know, I'd interacted with her as a consumer, and figured out kind of where she was and her MO as far as, you know, her hours of operation.
Oh, so you pretended to be a consumer?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so I waited on, this is back actually before ATA was formed. And I sat there for a good 3 hours and waited for law enforcement to finally show up to do the rest. But I stayed on site but as I was there, I just watched John after John bring in beer And I knew they were her clients because how many 6-packs of Corona, you know, what's the odds of all these different guys just getting a hotel room, bringing in a 6-pack of Corona?
Yeah.
Because that's what she'd requested. So that being said, it's just kind of like, you know, it was much like what we went through when we first met and trying to find Hadassah. It was just painful to know that they were abusing her and there was nothing I could do about it for that 3 hours. Like, you know, it's just, what can I do? You know? So I waited for law enforcement. They showed up and took her back home to her mom's, which her trafficker just came and picked her up from her mom's house late at night after everybody gone to bed. I mean, it was literally like in one door, out the other.
Is she doing okay today? Has she?
I think she's better. She's an adult now. I think she's better. I wouldn't say it's great. I would say she probably has a little way to go to get, I think, where she's going to really be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, every journey is different. Mine took forever, I swear.
Yeah.
If I would talk to 16-year-old me now, I think things would be a lot different. You know, I didn't imagine I would live past 30, you know, that was.
And here you are.
Not even a thing. So,
yeah, God is.
And no, like that I'm a PI. I mean, are you serious? You know, and when back then, you know, I'd have girls that would call me crying and saying, one of them I went to high school with, you know, they got a pimp and I told them, don't do that. Don't talk to these guys because they're no good. And all they're going to do is X, Y, Z. And sure enough, what did she do? Well, actually there's 2 of them. One, I wish I could remember her name, but I can't remember it. I rack my brain often trying to go, man, what is her name? So I can look her up and try to contact her, but I can't remember. But they got hooked up with pimps that had 12 and 15 girls living in a, you know, house in Florida and Miami Beach, West Palm Beach, you know, in that general area. And sure enough, they'd always call me a few days in crying and they would say, he beat me, or he raped me, or he let his friends rape me. I mean, just horrible. And I would just be like, okay, I'll be there at 1 o'clock in the morning or 2, you know, whatever time, you know, 5 a.m., just have your stuff ready to go. And no drama, like just get in the car and let's go. And the second time I did it, from the same nightclub too, by the way, these girls were working there. The club actually got in contact with me and said, they threatened me. They said, you know, if you ever do that again, like, you'll see what happens.
Oh, God.
Because the pimps called the club and said, you know, I'm not going to bring any more of my girls to your club and watch, you know, watch what happens. You know, you'll be dead. You won't make any money. You know, it's just a circle of threats, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, so I think the next day I went and I grabbed my stuff from the locker. And the moment I walked in through the back door, the second girl that I had just recovered the day before is getting arrested. She had a warrant, open warrant. Wow. The pimp actually called the police and told them where she was, and they came and arrested her in her stripper gear. I felt so bad for her. And she just, I will never forget it. She just looked up at me. They were handcuffing her in the dressing room in her clothes, like her heels and her dress. I mean, totally see-through. It was just, there was no dignity to it at all. I mean, let her get dressed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I literally was like, shut the door. It was like, I'm out of here. Because I was doing my own crazy stuff. I was, you know, I mean, in hindsight, I look at it, technically what I did, you know, I was working there underage. I knew I was underage, but I was desperate. So I thought I would get in trouble. But in reality, the club is in trouble because they took, you know, a false ID that was clearly not me, or, you know, I was clearly 16, you know what I mean? I was a baby. So it was just kind of like, they're really on the hook. But back then, you know, and even for those that are, you know, in the life or thinking about like working at a commercial, sexually oriented business, I tell you, like, they will always make you think that you're wrong and they're right. And they will always make you think that you don't have a choice. And to which I say, no, that's not the truth. That's not acceptable. But yeah, I thought, and I turned around and I left and I said to myself, like, nothing in that locker is worth getting myself in trouble. So
yeah, or killed.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that they would have gone that far, but, you know, that particular nightclub's no longer there. It's been demolished, but it's now a huge club. Well, no, not too awesome.
Oh.
It's actually, they have stock on the, I think, NASDAQ. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And they went and reopened the club. Well, they had torn that one down, and they opened one in like an old wholesale club building. So it's like huge. I mean, it's like a monster.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it goes on and on and on.
And I mean, really, you know, it's like they're selling, it's the brothels. They're legal brothels. I mean, that's really what it is. And while not all dancers have sex or perform sexual, you know, acts, I mean, it is very prevalent. And I would say it's even more prevalent now that that's a thing versus back when I worked in it, because it was a totally different era and time, but it still very much was a thing. So.
Yeah, I'm sure it still goes on in some clubs. It has to. Well, I know it does, because some girls that I've talked to, it happens.
Yeah.
So, okay. Share, let's move into two things. I think you have your notes there, but share what people can do to be involved in the fight. And we did 3 things, like if people are in law enforcement, if people work in education, and then finding groups who say and do. So those that are watching this that are like, how can I get involved? You know, yes, I can, you know, give money to an organization, but what, you know, they want to do more.
Sure. Well, if you're going to give, make sure you're giving to the right organizations. There's some lovely organizations out there that are really doing a lot of work and making sure that, you know, they're backing up their mission. That's like, cannot stress that enough. Really ask some hard questions. And they should answer them. If they want your donation, they should answer them. And if they don't, then you need to pause and ask yourself why. Two, you know, definitely if you want to get involved, I mean, you know, examine your skill set and see, you know, how you can apply it. I mean, there's always ways to apply almost any skill set, whatever it is, whether it's helping a nonprofit, you know, if you're an accountant, or if it's influencing your sphere of people that you're friends with or from work, you know, influencing your sphere of influence. I think Kat used to say that. It was great. But anyways, I think that's huge. And just, you know, and also, I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but, you know, pornography is, you know, a really huge issue. So turn off the porn. I mean, we have these young guys who can't have, you know, normal, healthy relationships and have to take medication to have, you know, I don't know the right word would be here in this podcast or video.
Yeah, but they're struggling with addictions.
Correct.
And are unable to have healthy, intimate relationships with spouses or whatever because of their, you know, addiction, continued exposure to pornography.
I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, definitely in the ways that you feel like comfortable, because it's definitely about comfort. I mean, I never push a volunteer to do more than they're happy with doing. I don't like that. So, you know, just whatever you're comfortable with doing, whether it's, you know, spreading the word and influencing your sphere of influence, or if it's, you know, you have a unique skill set, you're law enforcement, or you want to learn more and you want to get more involved and say, hey, you know, here's a great group that can spend more time on this and kind of do some heavy lifting, you know, get with them, learn how to better work with them. Because I think there's a lot of people out there that, like PIs like myself and JB, I mean, we do our very best and take huge pride and honor in assisting law enforcement. So we do exist. We are here, law enforcement. You just got to come find the group in your area, or if you're in Houston or around Houston, I would love to help in any way that I can. Trying to think of anything else. Our conversation the other night was so good. We should have recorded that.
I know. We were like getting all fired up.
Yeah, I know. And it's a lot easier to do when I know it's just you and not, you know, who knows.
Yeah, there's always like you know, the nervousness or like wanting to make sure that, you know, you're presenting well. And so it just, it's different than when you're just having a free conversation where you can.
Yeah, I'm not worried if I'm going to offend somebody or, you know, say something that may be a little faux pas. So I try to watch myself for sure.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine I would be offended if somebody was offended by you, because like.
It happens more often than you think.
Well, that's maybe your personality is what it needs to be to do what you're doing. I don't think
Yes.
like you could do what you're doing without the fierceness. I mean, it would, yeah.
Sometimes my little church ladies at, it's Houston's First Church of the Nazarene, and I absolutely adore that church. I wish I was a member. I should be a member, but Sunday sometimes is my only day off. Anyways, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I do love to visit with them, and they're just a huge supporter of ours. And I just, if any of them are watching, I thank you. But some of those wonderful Christian women, you know, when I'm dealing with certain victims and I have to be bad cop, I'm not necessarily smiley and friendly, and it's not a thing. Like, I have to be bad cop, and they hang well. I mean, they don't want, you know, they roll with it. And, you know, I always feel bad making them blush, but, you know, I have to sometimes be, you know, there's a hard side to me. I can't always be soft and sweet. So, and you have to be able to be that way in this, because you have to offer truths. And sometimes the truths are very ugly, and, you know.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing, and if you guys have any questions watching this, if you could just go ahead and start putting your questions out there now, because there's a little bit of a delay, that would be great. Share what parents should and should not do for victims after they've been recovered. And a couple of the things that we touched on the other day was providing access to services, appropriate services to the victim. Each family member, I think, did you write down what we talked about?
I have it here. Hang
okay,
on.
yeah. So if you could touch on those things, that was great information the other day.
You know, it was so late and I had such a long day, so thank you. Yeah, so provide access to services. I mean, if you have a victim who's just come out of a very bad situation, rather they want to make an outcry or not, I like to see them get a forensic exam, a SANE exam, because a lot of times things change from that first 24 hours to a week later. And preserving evidence, even if it never goes anywhere, in my opinion, is really the best thing.
And you're talking about, in civilian terms, the rape kit, right? Taking them to the emergency room and asking for a rape kit.
Correct. And in Houston, it's Texas Children's for minors. For adults, I know Memorial Hermann has a forensic program. And then I know there's another one called HCNFE, if anybody wants to look that up. I think they're trying to go mobile. But anyways, either way, it's really good to preserve that evidence, and you really have to do it. You really should do it as soon as possible, because the first thing that they're going to want to do is take a shower and clean themselves up, and then all the evidence just went down the drain, literally. And her state, whether she's been on any kind of substance, whether alcohol or drugs, might blur that. So definitely trying to be a supporter of her getting testing done and getting medication if she needs it, to take care of her physical well-being, but also collecting that data, that evidence, to make sure that she can pursue it in a few days, a week, 6 months. I mean, she can still pursue it. So
a lot of them come out with STDs.
Right. So it's getting the medication. So we want to definitely make sure that there's no, life-threatening diseases there. The other would be definitely when they're, if they're ready to go ahead and talk to law enforcement, definitely, make the right calls in your local jurisdiction. Do some research so you don't frustrate yourself, but find out where you need to call to get a human trafficking detective to come out and talk to them. Typically when they're at the hospital, they'll do it. If she's ready to make an outcry, the hospital will call. But let's say she goes to the hospital, she's not ready quite to talk yet. When she is ready to talk, as a family member, knowing who to call is really important. And this is if she's coming home. This is not that she needs to go to rehab, because there's other variables that would it's almost like a pinball machine that's like, okay, is there an addiction that she needs to actually be medically, monitored for? And that's like heroin, any kind of opioid, typically, sometimes alcohol, things like methamphetamine and cocaine, typically not, typically they just sleep it off. I'm sure there's rehabs out there for it, but it's not really, it's not something generally that you need to be monitored for in rehab. I mean, sometimes for sure, but I wouldn't say that's a common thing.
And a lot of hospitals provide, I don't know what it's called, but like a detox type thing, if I'm not mistaken, where they can go and go through the initial, scary detox as their body comes off of those substances.
And I think the scariest ones physically are like probably alcohol and any kind of opioid. Those two that you're going to have to probably be medicated for to not go into shock or seizures or whatnot. So that, and then, and then there's local programs you can find. Like here in Houston, we have behavioral health, which is like up to 10 days. And you do need insurance for it because it's would be very expensive self-pay, but it's a lockdown and they do a detox for minors. Or if they're like spazzing out mentally or whatever. It's not ideal, but it definitely is necessary if you need it. I'm trying to think of what else.
And then therapy, and I just want to chime in here, the appropriate therapy. I know in domestic violence, if you don't have the proper therapy from a therapist that specializes in domestic violence, you quite honestly might as well not waste. I mean, you need people that are experienced in helping victims. And there's great programs, like the program Hadessa is a long-term program, but just amazing programs out there that specialize in the aftercare of girls that have been recovered. But you also talked about family members getting therapy as well.
Absolutely. So we partnered with the Council on Recovery here in Houston, which is like your 12-step program where it was birthed out of. And they do help us with getting clients into, rehab or, outpatient, whatever. But they also have, I'm just speaking for Houstonians if you're listening, but I believe these places exist in other cities, especially larger cities. But they do have therapy on a sliding scale. And they also have a teen program. And then they also have a program for parents for a multitude of different things. So I think it's really important for parents. I mean, as you know, you go through so much and the worry and the anxiety and almost like PTSD, I swear, because you're just like in constant shock the entire time, wondering, where's my loved one? So I definitely do think it's extremely important to kind of understand like what has happened to your child or your loved one and how to like really process that and unpack that, because I think long-term, I think people just get very, there's just a lot of confusion that I think comes with it, especially if it's a new concept to you.
Yeah.
So I definitely think parents getting help is very important. And also it's kind of like, your kid's been through so much trauma and they're going through it, right? We know that people that have been sexually exploited or severely sexually abused have the PTSD levels of a combat war veteran coming back from war, right? We know that those are the kind of very similar. So dealing with that and the aftermath and the fallout is going to take a lot. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's just very important for parents to get to go talk to somebody, a licensed counselor.
Yeah. And then we talked about, it's sad that we need to mention this, but the exploiting of the victim after they've been recovered from exploitation. And I actually, with Hadessa, was shocked at almost, it was like everyone wanted Hadessa's not the pie, but let's just say the situation and her recovery, everyone wanted a piece of the pie that knew that she was here. And they, whatever they could do or be involved or, take her to this restaurant, she can come over here it was like, it was overwhelming almost. It was like, oh, we have a real victim of human trafficking. And
they want to tell her story. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't really tell my story too much just because, well, A, I don't like talking about it, but B, it's really nobody's business, unless I used to share it with them. And I sure wouldn't want somebody that is not somebody close to me. Like if JB mentioned it to somebody, I trust that he always has my honor. So in mind. So, or if you mentioned it, it's like, I know you, but just some random person, it's kind of like, it is overwhelming. And it's very re-exploitive. I had a victim call me from jail not that long ago. She got arrested she'd already been out of the life for a moment, but she got arrested. She was with somebody and they got pulled over. And long story short, they found some illegal substance on her, and she was calling me from, jail for help. And when I figured out who it was, I immediately called her mother and I, said, is it okay if I go bail her out? I was trying to be, honor her mother and not just do, she's her parent, right? And she didn't want me to do that. She just thought, oh, I cannot believe she's disgracing my family again. And I cannot believe she's ruining these opportunities. And, she ruined this scholarship. And you're just kind of like, what?
Yeah.
What is wrong with you? And then you go, oh, I get it. Your daughter, is I don't know. I don't want to say anything too crazy, but it's just kind of like,
it's like they're concerned about
them and their image versus
and their child's crisis ruining their image. And then you have those that just exploit them. And then I think there's a lot of well-meaning people, that truly want, to be involved. Sometimes ministries fight over them, like who's going to care for them.
Sure.
But then there's a lot of,
know why they do that either. It's kind of like, there's so much of this there. It's not like there's ever going to be an issue of being able to help people,
Yeah.
And if that day comes, then shouldn't we rejoice at closing our doors?
Yeah.
Right? Like, isn't that what we're fighting for?
Yeah. So I think that, just having her here for those months, I learned so much. Probably the biggest thing I learned was she probably shouldn't have been here. She could have come for, a week or two, but she really should have gone where she is now. I was very deceived in thinking that all of these different ministries that, guaranteed that they were able to help her, and they all had their own ideas. There is one program in Kansas City, Rendered Heart, that is phenomenal. And they're doing a good work. But unfortunately, by the time I got her to them, there was so much damage that was done by these various ministries that just wanted a piece of the pie, and to have the testimony of.
But then they don't actually do anything.
It made it worse.
Oh my gosh, the false promises of a bad ministry.
Yeah,
that is something. I know that Jesus has to be like.
Yeah, it wasn't helpful, but bless her heart. I've apologized to her a million times, and she's like, "It's okay." But I'm like, "We probably,
myself with navigating the ministries here prior to opening ATA and even during. I mean, you send them somewhere and they promise to do X, Y, Z, and then they don't do it, and then you get this angry phone call like, "How dare you send me there? I hate you," or whatever, and you're like, wait a minute, and of course they're just emotional. We don't react to that. We go, "I'm really sorry. Take a deep breath," or whatever, if you can at that moment, kind of offer that sort of, try to bring it from here to here, and try to de-escalate. But, because it's never about us. It's the victim's upset. She feels wronged again. It's never about us. But at the same time, it's like you trust that a ministry is going to do what they say they do, and then they don't.
And they have their own ideas about how it should be done. And like, I learned, like, I've worked with troubled kids for over 20 years, but there were some real unique things going on with her that I was not prepared for. And then just all the dynamics and stuff. I guess the end of the story is that when someone is recovered, they need, that the help that is proven, like an organization that has done the do, like, not just saying they're doing, and they have success stories of victims who have come out of their programs and recommend them. Like, yes, I went through this.
Yes, and they're not still in the program.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some locals here where they have that one token survivor that they somehow managed to keep her there. And she never graduates past that. She never goes on and gets her own apartment. She never goes on and gets her own, like, what? Like, why, but they keep them there because it's like, they don't, it's just re-exploitation.
Yeah. And it's not helping them. Like, we can't think that we're going to take these girls and one person, is going to do, or one pastor, or they need a village of trained people to work with the different, areas of their life that need to be worked through. So yeah, don't exploit victims after they've been exploited. Don't.
For example, I would never share like when we had responded to her your post, and we wrote an open letter to her. I would have never done that or even mentioned it, because there's just general dignity that you provide, and you should always provide and have the best, standards and practices, that you don't just share. And then also, while they're in your program or while you're helping them, you don't ask them to share.
No, when she was here for the 6 months, the only people that knew she was here was her family, and the people here that were helping her. There's so much trauma. There's just so much trauma, and they need peace and quiet and a proper support system in order to be successful. And I know this, and you probably know this, the average time it takes to overcome trauma, true trauma, is 3 to 5 years. And that is, it takes that long to establish new patterns of thought, new patterns of behavior, new patterns of response to negative stimuli, whatever in your life. So a victim of DV, a victim of trafficking, you can't take them 3 weeks out of recovery and stick them in a job. They're not able to respond to negative stimuli, like, a coworker they just can't. Like, there's time.
And sometimes they need medication. If their doctor or psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever deems that they need to be medicated to help, they need it. A lot of religious groups don't believe in that.
Yes. And we dealt with that here. There was one of the organizations that was helping her told me and her that she can't be on medication or we can't help her. And that's actually illegal. Like, you can't do that.
You can't give medical advice unless you're a medical doctor treating,
Yeah, and she so desperately needed to be on medication.
And sometimes that's okay. You got to get through this time. You got to get, especially if they have like maybe like an actual physical injury and they're healing from it, and it's just constantly setting them back to constantly be freaking out about it. Like, oh, my arm's broken and I'm disabled right now. And, or just whatever. And then they have these like injuries, or I'm trying to think of some other things. I mean, not only that, but just kind of re-entering normalcy, they melt down. And when they do, it's not about us. When they're melting down with us, we have to respond because we're the ones that are trying to help them. Right. Yeah. So helping them is to respond with love and patience and give them grace. But then you have a lot of people that, want to help, and in ministries that I've worked with, and they have their own mental illness that's never been addressed. Yeah. So when they respond, it's like almost like adding gasoline to a dumpster fire. Doesn't work. Yeah. You really have to be like stable to want to work with victims in aftercare. You really have to mentally, spiritually have a very good rooting. Or else you will just constantly react when they have a meltdown, which can sometimes be very ugly. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. And there's, I would say, just significant ups and downs, significant waves of ups and downs. So, all right, we have gone 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I don't see questions popping up on here. So any last thing you want to say? And then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Other than I am so proud of Hadassah. I'm so thankful for you. I am thankful for everything you've done for her in helping her, on her journey. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all on her. She's the real hero, right? Yes. Like, she had to make that choice to want it. And as myself, even, it's like, we have to want it. We have to want to change. We have to want to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. But I am just so grateful for your friendship and getting to know you and just walking alongside you. I'm very grateful. Yeah, I love you, and thank you for doing this interview again. Yes, anything you need. I love you. And please give Hadassah a big hug for me. I will. All right. Thank you, and thank you guys. Take care. Thanks for listening. Bye. All right, bye.